Hello Year 6. So our English session today, this is our final session in terms of actual sort of a learning lesson, because tomorrow and Thursday you're going to be doing your hot write, which remember is your version, sort of your retelling of chapter 7, your version of Elliot and Virgo going down into the cave, into where prisoner 42, Thanatos, is kept, and the meeting with him, and then their subsequent escape when he turns out to be the evil character that we now know him to be. Today, though, we're looking at your planning, but before that, we need to have a look at a starter, and then we'll quickly recap what we did yesterday, because that will be useful for today as well. So let's start with the starter. Nice, simple. All I'd like you to do is I'd like you to put a tick, or you can just write out the sentence and then say next to it what the type of noun is. But I'd like you to try and identify what type of noun each sentence uses. So what type of noun is the word bundle? What type of noun is the word justice? And what type of noun is the word zoo? So pause the screen, have a go at that. When you've done that, start the video up again, and we'll move on to the next part. Speak to you in a second. Okay, so quick recap over what we were doing yesterday. I'll just move myself out of the way so you can see things. Yesterday, we were looking at how we properly up-level and edit our work. We talked about how you first read over to check for punctuation errors, then for spelling errors, then you look at your vocabulary, and then you look at improving your sentence types generally. And we did that as a bit of an exercise here. We looked at the white sentences, and we then looked at how we can up-level those white sentences from what they are to begin with to what we transformed them into with some proper editing and some proper up-leveling. You all did a pretty decent job of that. I have to say it's still an area we could all work on. It's very easy and very tempting to just whiz by this stage quickly and not do some really focused up-leveling and really sort of focused editing as well. But that's where we make our writing go from pretty good to really, really greater depth, top quality writing. So it is worth spending that time on, which is something we'll still practice in class, but it is really, really important. Before you do any hot write, you should have been really properly editing. And when you've finished a hot write, you should still then be going back over and editing, which is why we give you at least 2 days on a hot write. All that being said then, let's move on to having a look at what we are doing for our hot write, or to help us with our hot write today. So our WALT for today is to plan our writing. And to do that, we're going to need to summarize the paragraphs we're going to use. We're going to need to identify and think about linking those paragraphs, and then also thinking about including some specific sentences that we might then go on to use in our writing. So you've seen these sort of things before, but before we go on to looking at the grid we're going to use today, a bit of a reminder for you of all the many, many WALTs we have covered, all the things we've learned in this unit, because remember, the whole point of these 3-week units of writing is that by the time you finish them, you try and use and incorporate all of the skills that you've shown. So we've looked at narratives. Sorry, we're not on that bit yet. I'm getting ahead of myself. When we're doing our stories, when we're writing a narrative in Cyprus, you will have heard me use this analogy a few times. It's quite like a roller coaster when we do a narrative. And when I say that, I mean that it sort of, you have lots of mini build-ups. You start building the excitement and then you shoot down the other side, and then you build the excitement again and then you shoot down the other side. And that's exactly what a roller coaster of a narrative should be doing. And we can think about that in terms of how we keep our reader hooked. We keep building some excitement and then releasing it a little bit, building that excitement and then releasing it a little bit. And that's why your different parts of the story will fit onto this narrative roller coaster somewhere. You'll have things like your opening, your introduction will be the first bit, and then you begin to build up. And then you get let off a little bit as you realize that actually it might be okay, but then you build up again. That's why a build up is normally one of the longest, well, it is the longest section when you're building up that tension. When you're at the very, very top of that peak, that's your climax, the highest, most dramatic point. And then when all the pressure is let off, that is your resolution, when things are proved to be all okay at the end, if that is what happens at the end. And that's what you're going to be doing today. You're going to be starting to create that basic narrative plan to make sure that your reader is really engaged, to make sure your reader is hooked all the time. So the basic narrative of the story is going to be the same for everybody. But then what you choose to do within that narrative, how you choose to build up the tension, your language, your vocabulary, whether you have little tweaks and twists, that's up to you. But the basic story that you're going to be telling will be a setting description and a character build at the beginning. Entering the cave, that will sort of come together, that bit. Seeing Thanatos when they get in the cave and him starting to manipulate and trick Elliot. Then there's that confrontation, whatever that looks like, whether it's a full-blown fight, a battle of some sort, or whether it's just them having to try and get away. And then finally them escaping the cave. That's your basic narrative roller coaster. And you can use that. You can go back to this screen as much as you want to remind yourself when you're doing this planning today, but your planning grid will still look more like we're used to. It will still look like a planning grid. Before we do that though, and this is where I was getting ahead of myself a minute ago, let's just look at all the things we've covered in this unit, because these are the things I want you to try and make sure you're including in your narrative today. So we've looked at different genres of writing and we've highlighted the key features on a narrative so that we are really clear on what narratives should contain and what a good narrative looks like. We've looked at lots of waggles this week, these few weeks, of really good narratives and how they include things. We've decided to look at the grammar, particularly the vocabulary and the grammar in a narrative and how it's used, looking again at waggles, identifying key grammar, answering questions about grammar choices. We've used lots of different authorial techniques, those Alan Peat sentences, writing our own sentences, using all the punctuation involved, looking at what effect they have on the reader, talking about that, discussing it, answering questions about that. We've looked at authorial techniques in our writing, I've done that twice. Using semicolons, again, that tied in nicely with the Alan Peat sentences, making sure we're using those semicolons correctly to connect two main clauses. Direct speech, so punctuating our speech properly, that's definitely 100% going to be in your narrative. Describing settings, that's going to be in there as well. You did some brilliant setting descriptions thinking about the 5 senses. Developing character, including using show, not tell, and integrating that dialogue. We've done that, that's going to be crucial. And then we've also written powerful opening paragraphs, as well as editing them. All of those things should be in your final piece, in your hot write, to show off all those skills. We've covered loads and you did a great job. Look back at what you've done, use that so that you then end up with the best piece of writing you can. To help you make sure you come up with the best possible piece of writing, you're going to complete your plan looking a little bit like this. You can have more paragraphs than this if you want to. If you think your opening is going to need 2 paragraphs, you want your build up to maybe have 3 paragraphs or whatever, that's fine. This is just a basic template for you to use and adapt however you would like. But it's going to have your paragraphs down one side, the contents, that's what's actually going in, what's happening in those paragraphs. You can take that from that roller coaster that I made as a basic idea. And then what techniques, which of those skills that we've learnt over the last 3 weeks that we've just looked at out of all those Waltz and Wolves, which of those are going to be used in those paragraphs? A bit of an example then would look something like this. So your content might look a bit like that. So the opening paragraph, that's going to be a setting description and character building. Build up 1's them entering the cave, build up 2, seeing Thanatos, that's what I put on that roller coaster. So you can use that, that's fine. You might want to go into a bit more detail. Remember, the more detail you go into here, the less thinking you need to do when it comes to the hot write tomorrow. And then in terms of putting techniques in, you're just going to choose techniques that you think might fit in that paragraph. Don't just put any random ones. Think about what's the best ones to use there. Well, I decided if it's an opening paragraph where I'm getting a really good setting description, semicolon is going to be useful to connect 2 main clauses. And then I've put in some of those Alan Peat sentence types for authorial techniques. So I'm going to use them all the more. I'm going to use tell and then show 3 examples. You can choose anything that you think will work really well there. You might decide that actually you want some dialogue in there between Elliot and Virgo, discussing how they're feeling and talking about that to build the tension and to sort of really set the scene. That's completely up to you. But that is your task for today. Your main task is to complete a really clear planning grid for your hot write. Tomorrow and Thursday, there won't be a video. Well, I might put out a nice short one, or I might just put a thing on your class story, just reminding you of what to do. We'll see. It depends what I think works best. But if there isn't a video, then best of luck with these. But you are then having 2 days on your hot write, making sure you're using that time to get it really neatly written up. Well, to get it written up first, to edit it, and then to write it up neatly as well. There also won't be any of the big reads, because I think 2 days to get it fully written when it's a narrative, and they're quite long normally narratives, you're looking at probably 2, maybe even 3. Some of you write 4 often pages. Writing it up, then editing it, then writing it up neat, I think you're going to need all of the time. So there won't be big reads either. So this is the last video you will be getting from me in terms of maths and English. I want you to then really, really focus on making sure that this is a really good quality piece of writing, and that you finish off getting in all of the techniques that you've worked so hard for. Please use the work you've already done. I can't stress that enough. You've put in some brilliant work. You've done absolutely massive effort so far. Use what you've done to help you over the next 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday, doing that hot write. Best of luck though. Don't get too distracted by the snow, although it's incredible and I'm loving it. Do go out in the afternoons and have a bit of a go and play in the snow. Don't forget my challenge to build the most creative snowman. You've got a few days for that, hopefully, if the snow stays. And then I'll decide a winner on Thursday. Anyway, speak to you again soon. Have a lovely half term if I don't speak to you face to face before then. And then I will be back with you after half term. Speak to you soon. Bye.